I don't. I think Halima is out of network area maybe. Okay, so basically, students, we are starting with a very fresh chapter. Okay, this is a flow, and after this class, we'll do numerical, and then I'll give you a recap of everything. Okay, recap of all the things we have done. So, is it my screen visible, Sania Mahdi?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So now budget deficit. Okay. So budget deficit is something like you can say a problem. Deficit is always a bad term. Okay. It is always a problem. Now, what is budget deficit? So basically, for example, this it's your birthday party and you prepared the plan that you are getting 500 rupees from your mother. 100 you will be using here and 100 you will be using here. 300 you will be using here. And like this, your 500 will be there. Okay. But somehow the actual day, it was your budget, right? You assumed it that this will happen. But the actual day, what happened? The cake was for 150 rupees. And the pizza was for 150 rupees. And this was for 300 rupees. Okay. So what happened at that time? Okay, just give me 1 minute. Let Halima join. We'll start. Am I audible, students? Halima?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Halima, audible to you? Halima, can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Good. So basically, Halima, we are starting with the chapter. We are starting with very new thing, which is budgetary deficit. Okay, this is a term, deficit. And this term, whenever you are getting this deficit, this is a negative term, not a good one. Okay. So I was just explaining you what is deficit. Okay, budgetary deficit is problem in the budget. So what was the story? For example, it's your birthday next month and you are planning the things that you will be getting 500 rupees from your mother and 100 rupees you will be utilizing there and 100 rupees there and 300. This is how you will be using. But this was the budget. But on actual day, when was your birthday? The actual day, I would say. Okay. So basically what was happening? That the price of cake was 150 rupees. The price of pizza was 150 rupees. So when you totaled it, it was 600 rupees. Right? So what is happening? Your budget is 500 rupees, but your expenditure is 600 rupees. So basically 100 rupees is the extra amount. Okay. So what was happening? So budget deficit is basically the extra money. Whatever your budget is, and if you are spending more than that, that is known as deficit. Clear both the girls terms?
Yes, ma'am.
Right? So deficit is basically whatever your budget is. If it is exceeding, you are spending more. Your expenditure is more as compared to your budget. How much money you have, whatever revenue you are getting, whatever receipt you have. If your receipts are less and your expenditure is more, that is known as deficit, which is always a problem. Okay, in that case, for example, the bill was 600 rupees. What you will be doing, you will be asking your friend to give you 100 rupees. You will be borrow 100 rupees from your friend, like that. Okay, so basically deficit was this term. Now we'll understand what is budget deficit and what are its types. Okay. So budget deficit. Budget deficit is defined as the excess of total estimated expenditure over the total estimated revenue. So budget deficit is basically excess. Whatever your expenditure was, it is more now. And whatever your revenue was, it over the revenue. For example, you are getting 500 rupees from your mom. Okay. But your budget, you are getting 500 rupees, but your expenditure is 600 rupees. So what is happening? It is getting over the revenue. Okay. So budget deficit is defined as the excess of total estimated expenditure. Your expenditure is excess, like more than, over the total estimate revenue. Whatever money you are getting, revenue you are getting, your expenditure is more than that. That is known as budget deficit. Okay. So when the government expenditure exceeds its revenue, it incur a budgetary deficit. So whenever the expenditure of government exceeds its revenue, it is known as budgetary deficit. Okay. So whenever, for example, whatever revenue governments are getting, and for example, they are getting 100 rupees revenue, and but their expenditure is 300 rupees, so it is exceeding the revenue, right? So it is known as budgetary deficit. Okay, clear both the girls?
Yes, ma'am. Yes.
Okay, good. Now, basically, there are three types of budgetary deficit. One is revenue deficit. Over here, there are high chances whether you either you will be getting the numerical portion of or you will be getting the theory portion from the budgetary deficit concept. Okay, budget deficit concept. So first thing is revenue deficit, second is fiscal deficit, and third is primary deficit. Okay. So formula for revenue deficit is total expenditure minus total revenue receipt. Okay. Fiscal deficit, total expenditure minus total receipt, but over here you exclude the borrowing. You don't take borrowings. Okay. Primary deficit is fiscal deficit minus interest paid. Okay, so you will be writing all this formula. But and one by one, what we are going to study in this chapter is for revenue. First, we will study definition. These three things we are going to study: revenue deficit, fiscal deficit, and the primary deficit. Okay, the story will be like first you will be defining it, define, then implication. Now, like how would you get to know that this is revenue deficit or primary deficit? Okay, and then third, the suggestive measure. Now you are in problem. For example, your bill was 600 rupees. Then I'll suggest you can take money from your friend, or I'll suggest you ask the manager that you will be giving this amount tomorrow, or ask your mother to transfer 100 rupees to you. I'll be giving you suggestions, right? So for all these three things, we are going to study three things. First, definition. Second, implication. Third, suggestive measure. Okay, these three things we are going to study in this chapter. Clear, girls?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. I know this chapter is a little bit boring, but don't worry. Once we are done, I'll just explain you everything again. Okay, so you can write this down. Budget deficit and its type, budget deficit definition, and then the types. Then we'll start with revenue deficit.
Okay, ma'am. Done. Finish.
Good. Clear for the girls?
Yes.
Madhi, am I audible now? I think you are facing network issues. So now we'll start with the revenue deficit. Okay, so first what I told you what we'll be doing, we'll be doing definition, then implication and then suggestive measure. Okay, so first you will be writing, the heading will be revenue deficit, and then you'll be writing a difference between total expenditure and total revenue receipt is known as revenue deficit. Okay, so definition will be from here itself. Difference between total expenditure and total revenue receipt is known as revenue deficit. So quickly write down that first revenue deficit. Okay, I'll just tell you how to write. First, write revenue deficit and then here definition. Difference between total, whatever it is, total expenditure and total revenue receipt is known as revenue deficit. Okay. Done.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so basically, I think you have written that the total revenue deficit. Difference between total expenditure and total revenue receipt is known as revenue deficit. Okay. Okay. So now we'll start with the implications. Okay. So implications are basically how will you get to know that this is revenue deficit? How will you get to know that this is fiscal deficit or the yeah. I hope my screen is visible.
Yes, ma'am.
Halima visible and Madhi. I think Madhi.
It's visible.
Okay. So implications are revenue deficit. Now, revenue deficit indicate the inability of the government to meet the expenditure on routine functioning of the economy. First problem is what is revenue deficit? What is happening? Why there is a deficit? Because a revenue deficit indicates that government is unable, government is useless because whatever the expenditure is, government is unable to do so. Okay, as you were planning a birthday treat, okay, but you were planning that I'll be arranging a cake, a pizza, pastry like that. But when you actually when your birthday came, everything was highly priced and your budget was low. So your friend will be saying now that how he or she has organized the birthday party. It was not up to the mark. He was unable to pay the bill. All that. So similarly, when the problem of revenue deficit occurs, so what happens? Revenue deficit indicates the inability, like government is unable, okay, to meet the expenditure on the routine functioning of the economy. Okay, so it shows the inability that government is useless and government, whatever the expenditure government has to do, government is unable to do so. Okay, For example, government has 100 rupees with them. Okay, there are other sector like schooling, hospitals, media, and all that. So government has to, give the money. So, but because of this revenue deficit problem, what was happening? Government was unable to do expenditure on these sectors. Why? Because government is already in burden. Government already spent lots of money. That's right now government don't have money. So it shows the inability of the government to meet the expenditure. Meet the expenditure means how much money you were it was required from your end to do, you were unable to do so. Okay, so that's why routine functioning of the economy. Okay, then second point is it implies this saving of the government account because government is using up savings of the other sector of economy to cover the gap between the revenue expenditure and the revenue receipt. Now, for example, you were saving some money. Right now your budget is already you are out of budget, right? So what were you doing? You will be using your money from the savings. So this saving is basically opposite of saving. Now you are using the money from the saving funds, like from different sector you are using it. Okay. So it implies it implies the inability of the government. The government is useless. Government is unable to meet the expenditure. Second, it implies this saving of the government. Now what government will be doing? Of course, the government will be using the money from the savings, right? So it implies this saving on government because government is using up savings of other sector of the economy to cover the gap between the revenue expenditure and revenue deficit. Receipt. So there is a gap that you were getting 100 rupees, but your expenditure is 500 rupees. So there is a gap. So in order to fulfill this gap, government will be using its saving from different sectors. That means it implies this saving on government. Getting it both these points?
Yes,
Everyone?
got it.
Next, it implies that government has to make up this deficit by using its capital budget either through borrowings or through sales of its assets. Okay, so now what government will be doing? Of course, you have taken money from someone else. Now you have to pay it. So what will happening? Government will be using disturbing its capital budget. Okay, so it implies that government has to make up its deficit by disturbing its capital budget either through borrowings or sale of its assets. Okay, so you don't have to write this story. You will be writing from here. Okay, it means that revenue deficit either leads to increase in liability in form of borrowing or reduces the assets through sale of its assets. Okay, so now revenue deficit. Now I have already taken money from someone else. Now I have to pay. So what I will do? Either I will take money from someone that will increase my liability, or what I'll do? I'll sell my assets that will decrease my assets. Okay. So a revenue deficit implies that revenue deficit either leads to increase in liability. If you are taking money from someone in the form of borrowing, then your liability will be increased. Okay. Or in case you are selling something, then there is reduce in your assets. That is disinvestment. Getting it? Third point clear, girls, boys?
Yes.
And
Yes.
next, use of capital receipt may lead to, you have to write from here. Okay. It means, don't write this thing. Use of capital receipt may lead to inflation situation in the market if wasteful expenditure by government is not controlled. Now this point is very much important and I'll just explain. Okay. Now what was happening? For example, this is government. Okay. So these are the product in the market. Okay. So basically the price was 10, 20, 30 and 40. Everything was going very smooth. Okay. But suddenly what happened? There come the deficit. Okay, government, there come the deficit. The problem of deficit occur over here. So now what government will be doing? Government will be increasing the price of this product because government need money, right? So what government will do? Now this product is for 20 rupees. The 20 rupees product is for 30 rupees. The 30 is for 40, like that. So government will be basically, increasing the price. And whenever we increase price, okay, whenever we increase price, that is known as inflation. Inflation. Okay, IN is for increase and IN for is increase in price. Okay, so because government is in problem right now, government needs money. So from where government will be taking money? From you people, from we, because we are the people. So government what will be doing? Government will be increasing the price. Okay, so that thing is known as inflation. Okay, clear this point?
Yeah. Yes, ma'am.
So basically, use of capital receipt may lead to inflationary situation in the economy if wasteful expenditure by government is not controlled. If government will not stop it's overexpending. Then there will be a situation of inflation, means prices will be increasing. Okay. And next is higher borrowing will increase the for future burden to repay the loan amount and the interest payment. Now, for example, okay. Okay. So for example, this is the government, and you know there is a term for government like 5 years. You can say. Okay. So government took loan in the fourth year. When there was fourth year, government took loan of 100 rupees. Government was, and fifth year, government has only paid 50 rupees. 50 rupees was still remain. So what was happening next year? Next year, new government will be there. Okay. But this 50 rupees, which this government took as a loan, now the other government which came in the control, they have to pay like a family. Okay, for example, it's someone's grandfather. He took loan from someone, and somehow like he was very aged and he passed up. Okay, he took loan. Now who will be paying the loan? Of course, his son, right? And the same situation happens with the government. If first government took loan from someone and some simultaneously whatever happened, their session get expired or their terms get ended. So what happened? The upcoming government who will be coming, the upcoming generation, they have to pay the see. This money was taken by the grandfather, but still the son who was very innocent, there was no use, but still he is paying because it's a duty. It's his duty. Why? Because he like the person who took was his father. Similarly, in the case of government, also the next government they have to pay. Why? Because of course we belongs to one country. So yeah, there is a process that no matter who will be taking loan, the other government will be paying it. Okay, so higher borrowing. If your borrowings are high, that will increase the future burden, like the burden on the future generation to repay the loan, because we have to repay the loan plus we have to pay the interest over that. So this is the problem happens when there is a revenue deficit. Okay, clear? Last point.
Yes,
Okay, so quickly we'll do all the things again. Revenue deficit indicates the inability of the government. First, revenue deficit means the government is unable, useless to meet the expenditure. Okay, and next is second, this saving. Now government is in the problem, so what government will be doing? Government will be basically using the savings from different sectors to meet cover the gap between the revenue expenditure and revenue receipt. Okay. Next, it means that revenue deficit either leads to your liability by borrowing. If you are borrowing, that means your liability will be increased. And in case you are selling something, then your assets will be decreased. Okay. Last, if your capital receipt, if you will be using your capital receipt, that will lead to inflationary situation. If government continue to use, like if the wasteful expenditure by government is not stopped. Okay. Last, higher borrowing. If your borrowing will be high, that will increase the future burden, the burden on the future generation to repay the loans and the interest rate. So these are the basically the implications of revenue deficit. So in exam hall, you may get the direct question that what are the implications of revenue deficit, or they'll be asking why higher borrowing, how higher borrowing affect the people or the economy. So you'll say higher borrowing will increase the future burden and like for the loan repayment, or you can say the interest rate. Clear?
yes, ma'am.
Okay, so quickly write the implications of revenue deficit, and whenever you are writing it, read it loud because that will help you to remember. Okay, you can write it.
I'm done.
Okay, I'll just wait for 1 more minute, okay? Then
I'm here also.
both. Okay. Now students will be doing the measures to reduce their revenue deficit. Okay. So now the problem is already there, and now you have to remove the things. Okay. So basically, just a minute. Okay. So basically now measure to reduce the revenue deficit. Okay. So first thing is that there are two things. One is you have to reduce the public expenditure. How much money you are spending on the public, you have to reduce that. Okay. For example, you have taken loan from someone. So what I will suggest you that whatever money you are spending now, just reduce your spending. Right? When reduce your expenditure. Similarly, first thing is that measure to reduce public expenditure. Public expenditure government has to reduce. Okay. For example, earlier government was spending 100 rupees on schools. Now you have to reduce it to 80 or maybe 50. Okay, so that you can meet the balance, meet the gap between the both the things. And next one is measure to increase revenue. Now I'll be asking you to earn more, right? To increase your income. So similarly, I'll be suggesting the government to increase the revenue. Revenue means receiving the money. Okay. So first thing is that how government will reduce the public expenditure. So a drastic resolution on wasteful expenditure like the subsidies and all that. Subsidies are basically giving the price, giving the product and cheaper price to the people, poor people. So I'll be suggesting government that you earlier you were giving subsidies, but now reduce the expenditure on subsidies. Okay. Second, non-plan expenditure. For example, something happened suddenly, non-plan expenditure. So I'll be asking government two things. If you want to, how you can reduce the expenditure, public expenditure first, stop providing subsidies, like reduce it. Okay. Or second, curtail, like start like saving, and instead of spending money on non-plan expenditure, don't do that. Curtailing is basically decreasing or stopping. Okay. Now measure to increase revenue. Now you have to earn extra. From where you will be doing? First, I'll be suggesting government to impose tax. Okay, for every product, just impose tax. So, for example, earlier this product is for 10 rupees. Now, by imposing tax of 5 rupees, now this is for 15 rupees. So, first I will say impose tax on each and everything. Second, you should make efforts should be made to increase income from public sector. Like there are public hospitals, everyone they give tax, they pay something to government. So what I'll be suggesting government, you should make some schemes or policy in such a way that the people of public sector should give you money. Okay. Next is tax evasion should be controlled. Tax evasion, basically there are lots of people who don't pay tax. Sometimes government just neglect that. But tax evasion means if you are not paying tax, you are eligible. For example, direct tax you have to pay, but you are not paying it. That should be controlled. You should make sure that each and every person is paying tax. Then only you can generate revenue. Okay. So again, we'll be doing it revenue. How you can reduce the revenue deficit. So basically, if you want to reduce the revenue deficit, there are basically two things. One, reduce the public expenditure and increase your salary, increase your revenue. Okay. So how you will reduce your expenditure? First, stop wasting your money on the subsidies. Okay. Next, stop wasting your money on the non-plan expenditure. Okay. Planned you have to do, but non-plan you have to control. Next, if you want to increase your revenue, so first impose tax on each and everything. Why? Because if you will impose tax, of course, revenue will be there. You will be getting more money, right? Second, efforts should be made to increase the income from public sector. Whatever the public enterprises are there, I'll just make policy in such a way that they pay more tax. They will pay, if they will pay more tax, then more money will come to me, my revenue will increase. Okay. Next, tax evasion. Tax evasion is basically those people who are not giving tax or who are not paying tax on time. So that should be controlled. Earlier, for example, there are 10 defaulters who are not paying tax. So you have to make sure that there are zero defaulter who are not paying tax. Okay. So if you will be doing this, your revenue will be increased, and if you will be doing this, your public expenditure will be reduced. And if both the things improve, then you can reduce your revenue deficit. Clear? Both the girls? Yes, no, maybe.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, Madhi, are you here? Are you getting it? Okay, Madhi is facing some issues, I guess. Okay, now you can write it down. I hope I have made myself clear, Sanya and Halima.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, Okay. Who is done? Okay, both of you done? Actually, I cannot see.
I finish here.
Oh, I'll just wait for one more minute. You can write it.
Done, ma'am.
Okay, then great. Okay, so I hope girls you are getting it right. We are very close to close this topic soon, but yeah. Just a quick revision. Budget deficit is basically when your expenditure get over your revenue. That is known as budget deficit. There are three types of budget deficit: revenue, fiscal, and primary. Revenue, we are done with definition, the implication, and the suggestion. Definition is basically the difference between total expenditure and total revenue. Okay. Implications, all those things. So revise the implication in next class. One by one, we will be telling one implication, Halima, one implication, Sana, like this. Okay. And last one is measure. One measure Halima will be explaining, one measure Sana will be explaining. Okay.